Today I want to talk about cheating and the fear surrounding cheating, and then my stories surrounding cheating for myself, how I had to break that down, how this affected my relationship. And I think this is a really good topic to cover because most people hold cheating in a very rigid way. So before I go any further, as always, look for that What's Up link down below by Phil. If this is something you're struggling with our OCD, we get this every single day. Many people have fears surrounding cheating. Many people hold rigid black and whites about cheating. You know, you can watch someone talk about maybe something going on in war or something like that, and they talk about these atrocities, and they talk about people being horrible. And then when you listen to them talk about cheating, just physical cheating, even if the person, who was, acting in a cheating manner was giving away a lot of their money to charity, and they were doing a lot of philanthropic work and stuff like that. And then people, if you cut those clips, it's like, well, wait a second, you're talking about someone who commits an act of cheating, sleeping with someone with the same tone that you're talking about someone who's maybe murdering someone or dying in war. So which one is it? And this is how you break that down, because humans are very, very good at just speaking and not actually thinking about what they're saying ever. How do I know this? Because I did this my whole life until I started suffering with OCD. So, okay, let's start out with the number one most important thing about cheating, okay? Cheating is primarily, if not completely, a belief that's man-made, okay? That comes from monogamy, and monogamy comes from religion. There is no universal principle that everyone is bound to be with one person. Now, this is something that really, really is hard to wrap your head around, and there's no way to prove that. And how do we know that? Well, if you read The Myth of Self-Esteem, in the book, The Myth of Self-Esteem, Ellis talks about the Indonesia tribes who actually take pride and honor in wife swinging. So you get married, you send your wife off to sleep with other members of the tribe, et cetera, et cetera. And then when you go to certain areas, like Rob and me were looking at a Japanese, I think it was downtown in Hong Kong, they were asking women, hey, if your husband sleeps with a prostitute, is that cheating? And they were like, no, not really, because I know he loves me, and he's a guy, and he has urges, and he wants to go and do his thing as long as he tells me. So, and then people would freak out. And the comments were all obviously Western cultured Americans, like you could just tell, or maybe from the United Kingdom and in other areas of Europe where that's much more taboo. It's the same thing like marrying your first cousin. You go to Pakistan or other areas around the world, it's common practice to marry your cousin, and then in America, it's not. So the only difference is the cultural perspective. It doesn't make it good or bad. It just makes it whatever the world and where you live. So I struggled severely with cheating. The majority of my life, I have cheated on my wife numerous times, whether that was cheating when it came to messaging other women. My girlfriend before, Erica, it was really, really bad. I struggled with going to see other women a lot. And this was a behavior I engaged in primarily since I started, sleeping with women since I was 17, 16. I think I lost my virginity before that, but then when it became like a problem is when I first started dating, which was my first girlfriend named Amanda, who I believe I cheat. I don't think I haven't been faithful to one woman I've ever been with. So it was a big habit that I had that I wanted to change. And then what happened was, Erica kept finding me messaging other women, and then she's like, what are you doing? You're messaging all these other women. So I was like, grew up at the Jersey Shore, that kind of like egotistical persona because I was afraid of rejection, so I overcompensated. Again, as I always say, I think Freud and Jung got the ego wrong. I don't think the ego is something the ego is just fear. The ego, to me, it's clear as day was what the ego is to me, at least in my opinion, that it's the fear of rejection with an overcompensation of acting egotistical. It's not some like ego, like most people think ego is narcissism. It's not. Narcissism, like true narcissism, is actually very rare. It's narcissistic personality disorder, but that's, not to get off topic. Anyway, so I really struggled with that, and I had a lot of fears about being with one woman for the rest of my life. That really scared me, and I wanted new experiences, so I wanted to do whatever I wanted to do. And I did a lot of stuff like this, and I struggled with this for a long time. Erica wasn't as bad because I did one at that time when I was getting together with Erica, and then we got married. I wanted to try to make it work, but my addictions were getting the best of me. I also struggled with all the adult websites. Again, I know for someone like myself, I try to be as open-minded as I can. I don't think pornography is inherently good or bad. I think it's just primarily has more cons for most people, like myself especially. So the reason why I stopped using pornography was it was a compulsion, one of my largest ones, coming up on 21 months without it, coming up here in 4 days, almost at 2 years on January 23rd. Very cool. And that involves not using Instagram and stuff like that either, which a lot of people struggle with. So anyway, so I kind of wanted a more sustainable relationship with my wife, but I kept giving in to my compulsions because it was a habit. And then Erica kept catching me, and she had other women message her, and basically it was really, really bad. And to the point where I had a woman message Erica and say that I was going to see her, and then that ended up being a really, really, really big problem. And then she was basically done. So she was about to move out. She was looking at apartments, and this was still kind of when video games were only freshly put away. So still, like, I had known Rob for about a year at this point, and I was still kind of giving into this behavior to a good degree. And I wanted to change. So, and that's what made me do it. So the most important thing to cover is that, you hear a lot of stuff in the media, like, once a cheater, always a cheater. That's a very, very silly statement. And it's a very superficial statement. So it's like, imagine being a child who steals candy or something like that. Or like one of my friend's kids, like, came home from school like a year ago and stole all the candy out of the teacher's lounge. And like, you can say like, once a stealer, always a stealer, but that's very silly. But because when sex is involved and there's another individual involved, people think that there's something else going on that's like more magical or more harmful. But it's not. It's the same thing with addiction. Like, when I tell people there's no difference between a heroin addiction and a cocaine addiction versus sex addiction. And they know that. The only difference is one of them is gearing that towards sex and one of them is gearing it towards a hard drug. So, but the principle is the same. And anyone who's been addicted to those particular things, they understand that once you get your prize, which is your drug or the individual of choice you're sleeping with, or sexting or chasing and pornography, once you get your prize, which is coming to a climax, you're like, ugh. And then the chase starts all over again. So it's really the chase of like going there, buying the drug, melting it down, doing the dope, going there, meeting the woman, etc. So it was a really big cycle I was stuck in for a really long time. But if I wouldn't have went through that, I'm very thankful I went through that. I'm very sorry what it did to Erica and any other woman I've ever been with, and I apologize if any of them ever finds this. I do apologize. I'm sorry for that. But I'm thankful that I went through that struggle because it taught me a lot about why I choose to practice monogamy as best as I can. It's, you'll never be able to say, well, I know for a fact that I would never do that. And that's just a very silly statement. I'll give you another reason why that one makes no sense. It's like, imagine someone who only starts cheating on their wife or husband 15 years into the marriage for whatever reasons. They're stressed, they're humans, they're susceptible. You're a guy, you're 50, and then you got some 32-year-old woman hitting on you and you become susceptible. It's very easy to do that nowadays. You gotta be on your A game. And you do that, and then, you realize why people do what they do. So imagine if I go back a year into the marriage. So same guy, same story, 32-year-old girl. I go back, and then a year into the marriage, and I say, hey man, you're going to cheat on your wife one day. He might be like, there's no way. I'm never cheating on my wife. That's never going to happen. I love my wife. I would never do that to her. Same thing with murder. What happens if someone kills their wife or they kill their husband? 27 years into a marriage, I just was using this example, and I go up to someone on their wedding day and I say, hey, you're going to murder your husband or your wife in 27 years from now. They'll look at me and be like, get out of my wedding room. Like, get out of here. We're trying to have a good day. Are you nuts? They might even start a fight. Can't believe you bring that up on my wedding day, put that thought in my mind, and things just happen, right? Again, because then people get confused because they say you're justifying cheating. That's not what we're saying. We're looking at things from a bird's eye view. One of the most important aspects of life, in my opinion, is two things. Number one, being able to sway your emotions, okay, in the sense that, sorry, that was the wrong words, being able to control them, not in the sense of not feeling them. You're still going to feel frustration or anger or shame or guilt, but not in the chronic level, because the chronic level, chronic shame and guilt, chronic depression, chronic anxiety serves no purpose, right? There's almost always a belief present, so it's so important to cover that, in that sense. So we got to think about, what does berating ourselves for cheating do? Because people are like, well, you should be guilty forever. No, I shouldn't. Says who? There's no universal law that says I need to be guilty. Also, chronic shame and chronic guilt doesn't actually put me in the right direction to actually become a problem solver, right? So, healthy dosages of shame and guilt. I'll give you an example. Continually cheating, messaging other women, doing all this stuff, and then you say to yourself, damn, I feel guilty. I don't want to do this anymore. I'm hurting Erica emotionally. She's about to leave me. I'm about to end my marriage. I have a business with her. It's going to be all this stuff. And I don't want to do this anymore. How do I change this? And then I go about working on that in a constructive way. But if I had the chronic shame and the chronic guilt, that comes from berating oneself. So you got to be careful. And when telling you, when anyone you hear someone say you should be guilty or you should this or you deserve that, universally, just brush that. Let people say what they want. Become comfortable with that. Humans are very rigid and they're very black and white. I wouldn't have known any of this unless I suffered with OCD. I always say, stoicism will live on because OCD sufferers tend to become the most stoic individuals on the planet. I can't really see how anyone would be able to be, scares me every time, be able to be more stoic than an OCD sufferer because of their vast amount of emotional suffering. But we have to be careful to not use that against other people. It's just our luck. It's like someone who, I'm sure people who get diagnosed with stage 4 cancer and practice these principles become extremely stoic too, even though their life might be shortened. So really extreme emotional turmoil and a lot of mistakes, such as like the cheating and messaging other women and doing all that stuff. And whether you're using, you're falling into the traps of prostitution. I work with a lot of people who have fallen into that trap. They've gotten caught. They haven't gotten caught yet. They don't know what to do. They're trying to get over this stuff. And they might be working with someone else for particular addiction issues. And then we're just working with them with the belief systems behind it, which we do. And we do very, very well because we've all struggled in many ways from the personal experience standpoint. So that's basically my whole story around cheating. And then what I did was, again, like I said, I realized that the chronic shame and the guilt berating myself would have no universal purpose. But I also knew that most people would not understand because they're like, oh, you're letting yourself off the hook and this and that. And that's a very, 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 very non-beneficial belief system. It doesn't act like, think about it, right? Oh, you're letting someone off the hook. You should be guilty. Why? How am I going to be able to change? If I berate myself forever, if I have guilt, it's like it makes no sense. Well, what if God's real? I don't believe in God. But I work with many people who do. We have great discussions. What if God is real? Okay. I say, okay, well, shouldn't you be guilty? I'm like, well, hopefully God, who's made everything, is a forgiving individual because he's seen all sorts of stuff. And hopefully he allows me into heaven, even though I don't believe in that. But that would be basically, how I would see it. If I'm gonna be alive, I'm gonna do my best to enjoy my life. As Albert Ellis says, the goal of life is to have a ball. And you gotta be careful about this because depending on who you're following, there's a lot of really big names out there in the psychological community. Many of the individuals I talk about who take life entirely too seriously and are really struggling with shame and guilt and depression. Like if you look at, when I look at someone, Jim Carrey is a great example. I could see his beliefs straight off the bat. Now he had serious depression. That was not for no reason. He held very strong, rigid, irrational beliefs, which are the majority of his depression. I put money on it. Jordan Peterson, also another great intellect. I've read, both of his new books. I haven't read Master Meaning. I think he's one of the most incredible psychological minds to ever live. If I ever got to do a discussion with him, I would probably be smiling from ear to ear because I really look up to him in many ways. But on the other side of the coin, he takes life entirely too seriously. And if he was to cheat on someone, or if his wife, I'm assuming Tammy, would cheat on him, it would be very bad because of his rigidity and his beliefs. And remember, acceptance doesn't mean agreement. When individuals cheat, when we cheat, we have to look at how we can constructively change. And healthy dosages of guilt and shame can help move you in the right direction when you use it as such. Chronic shame and guilt does not. When other people cheat on us, it's very important to break that down and say, look, humans are humans. And I kind of wanted to end it with this because it's a very interesting perspective. A lot of people will say, I can't believe that person would cheat. We hear that a lot. I can't believe that person would cheat. Why would that person cheat? Okay, they have such a great life. Well, let's flip that around. This is 2023. We have Tinder, Bumble, OnlyFans, Pornhub. People look basically naked in the gym. I mean, I go to a very, very serious bodybuilding gym and they're basically in their underwear, men and women. So it's like their undergarments are now their regular clothes. And they're in positions that are provocative. And these are things that everyone just wants to just brush over like it's not real. So guys, if they're not on their A game, it's very easy for them to slip if they haven't worked on their frustration tolerance of wearing those arousal urges and they keep giving into them because that's a form of a low frustration tolerance. So it makes much more sense today why people want to have open relationships, why people want to be swingers and polyamorous. I'm not saying that I think that that's the best lifestyle. You got to choose that for yourself. You got to do whatever you want to do for your life. But you got to also highlight the cons. I think there's a lot of cons with that lifestyle. And I know a lot of people in that lifestyle who I've had great conversations with. A friend of mine who I see a couple times a month. She's in that lifestyle, polyamorous, swinger, burlesque dancer. And she's like, of course it comes with cons, Nick. There could be a lot of jealousy. There could be a lot of internal drama and fighting. But, I have a lot of the pros of being able to be with anyone I want and stuff like that and having different relationships. So it's not just all pros or all cons. And you got to be careful, because when you talk to people with very traditional, rigid belief systems, they're going to fall into that trap. They're going to be very, very rigid on these things. And they're going to always be convincing people why this is a horrible action, why people are evil. You got to think about this. Calling someone who is a father of 3 and does all these things evil, but then you call a serial killer evil, well, there's a very big actionable difference between taking someone's life, okay, and cheating on your spouse. At least I think so. Both actions are weighted differently throughout society in the mind of the sufferer and depending on their fears. So these are just things to think about. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Again, I have fixed this behavior for the time being, but again, I don't want it to ever happen again. And I try my hardest in a non-compulsive way to be faithful and monogamous, because that's the path I'm choosing. But you never know what happens in the future. No one ever knows. And this is really hard for people to hear. But this is the life I live, and that's how I go. So thank you again, guys, as always. Enjoy the rest of your day.